Margot Hale had built the kind of life people admired from across a room. The problem was, some women knew exactly how to cross the room. By 7 o'clock, the rain had turned Boston glossy. It slicked the brick sidewalks outside the Heritage House and gathered in the seams of the old stone steps, catching the glow from the lanterns near the entrance. Cars pulled up one after another, black doors opening beneath dark umbrellas, heels clicking against wet pavement, tuxedo cuffs disappearing under wool coats. Inside, the air was warmer, candlelit, polished, full of champagne, winter perfume, and voices trained to sound effortless even when everyone was listening. Margot Hale stood just inside the ballroom doors with a headset tucked behind one ear and a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking. The champagne was useful. It made her look like a guest, not a woman quietly controlling 300 moving parts. She wore a deep navy gown with clean lines and a low, elegant back, the kind of dress that did not beg for attention but rewarded anyone who looked twice. Her dark hair was pinned at the nape of her neck. Her earrings were small diamonds, old enough to look inherited, though she had bought them herself after one especially impossible spring season. That was one of Margot's private pleasures, buying herself things people assumed someone else had given her. Tonight's gala was not the largest event she had ever produced, but it was one of the more delicate ones. Boston historical preservation people were not difficult because they were rich. Rich people were rarely difficult in original ways. They were difficult because each of them believed they understood taste better than everyone else in the building. Margot's job was to make all of them feel correct. The ballroom did look beautiful, though. Not overdone. Margot disliked rooms that screamed money. This one murmured it. Cream linens, antique brass candlesticks, dark greenery, white flowers, low lamps along the side walls, and just enough candlelight to soften every face without making the room look like it was trying to hide something. A string trio played near the windows. Waiters moved like shadows with silver trays. The old wood paneling glowed in the light, and the rain beyond the glass made the city feel closer and farther away at the same time. Margot checked the room once. Not like a guest. Like a conductor. The West Bar had a slight bottleneck. The sponsor table near the archway was too empty. One of the junior servers was standing too close to the kitchen doors, nervous enough to spill something if anyone startled him. "Nora," Margot said softly. Her assistant appeared beside her with the speed of a person who had learned that Margot rarely called twice. "Yes. Move one tray of crab cakes to the West Bar before the trustees start forming a traffic jam. Send Amelia to the sponsor table with the silver donor packets. And tell Mark to breathe before he ruins that tray." Nora glanced toward the young server. Poor Mark. Mark chose catering. He's 19. Then he has time to recover. Nora smiled and disappeared. Margot let her eyes travel across the room again. Everything was fine. Fine did not mean relax. Fine meant no one else could see the problems yet. That was enough. She had built a career on enough. At 40, Margot knew exactly what she was good at. She could read a room in under 10 seconds. She could tell which donor needed flattery, which sponsor needed distance, which board member had been drinking too quickly, which wife was about to smile through a public insult and remember it for the next 7 years. She could run a gala, a charity auction, a private museum dinner, a wedding for two families who hated each other, and a corporate celebration for a company whose executives had nothing in common except money and fear of irrelevance. She could raise a daughter, build a business, answer messages at midnight, select linen weights from memory, and convince caterers, florists, musicians, trustees, brides, and bored billionaires that they were all the most reasonable people in the world. She could do many things. Not answering Sloane Whitaker's text had apparently not been one of them. Her phone buzzed inside the slim pocket hidden along the seam of her dress. Margot did not check it immediately. That was the first rule with Sloane. Never look too quickly. She waited until Henry Vale, the board chair, crossed in front of her with a silver-haired donor and a laugh that sounded 90% funded. Then Margot lowered her champagne glass, turned slightly toward the wall, and slipped out her phone. "Sloane, are you pretending not to see this, or are you just enjoying making me wait?" Margot looked at the message for half a second longer than necessary. Then she typed back, "I'm working." The reply came almost instantly, I like watching you work. Margot's mouth betrayed her. Barely. Not a smile exactly. A warning sign. She locked the phone and put it away. Sloane had always had a talent for arriving before she entered a room. A text. A call. A memory. A smell on someone else's coat that reminded Margot of expensive hotel soap and warm skin. A photograph from an event where Sloane appeared in the background, one shoulder bare, one eyebrow lifted, as if she had been born knowing cameras were optional but attention was not. Whatever existed between them had been going on for almost 3 years. Not continuously. That would have required structure, and Sloane treated structure like a charming rumor. But often enough that Margot knew the shape of it too well. Sloane appeared. Sloane wanted. Sloane made Margot feel like the only solid thing in a room full of smoke. Then Sloane drifted back into her own life, not cruelly, not carelessly exactly, but without ever building anything that could hold weight. No promises. No real plans. No where is this going? No come with me next month. No toothbrush left behind. No holiday conversation. No shared calendar. Only nights that felt too alive to refuse and mornings that made Margot feel composed in the worst possible way. Margot understood it now. That was the irritating part. She was not 25. She was not confused. She was not being lied to. Sloane had never promised her a life. Sloane had only ever offered heat, and Margot, who had spent years being responsible, scheduled, sensible, and necessary, kept taking it. Because heat was not nothing. Because being wanted by Sloane Whitaker felt like being pulled out of a room where she had been polite for too long. Because Margot's body, inconveniently loyal to its own desires, did not care that her mind had started wanting more. Margot. The voice came from her left. She turned, already smiling in the correct temperature. Adrian Cross stood beside the old marble fireplace, shaking rain from the edge of his coat. For 1 second, time folded strangely. Not painfully, just noticeably. Adrian, at 43, had become the kind of handsome that looked less accidental than it had in his 20s. Dark hair with a little silver at the temples. Good tuxedo. Calm expression. A man who had learned how to occupy important rooms without seeming hungry for them. Adrian, Margot said. He leaned in and kissed her cheek lightly, a greeting so familiar and neutral that no one watching would be able to turn it into gossip unless they were truly desperate. You look very much in charge, he said. I am very much in charge. That explains the fear in the caterer's eyes. That's respect. Of course. Margot's smile warmed, because Adrian had earned that from her over the years. Not romantic warmth. Not even nostalgia, really. Just a long, practical tenderness built from shared history. They had been young together. Not high school sweethearts, not some grand tragic story, but young enough to mistake chemistry for direction and adult enough to deal with the consequences. Their daughter had arrived before either of them had learned how to build a life with someone else. Marriage had never made sense for them. Not because they hated each other. Not because anyone betrayed anyone. They simply had not been in love enough to pretend forever would be fair. So they had done something less dramatic and more useful. They had grown up. Separately mostly. But with care. Adrian had always shown up for their daughter. Tuition forms. Doctors. First apartment chaos. Emergency money when Margot's business was still a risk disguised as confidence. No grand speeches. No public performance. Just presence when it mattered. That counted. More than many love stories, Margot thought sometimes. How is she? Adrian asked. Margot knew immediately who he meant. She's fine. Busy. She called yesterday to tell me she has no clean towels but somehow had time to go to a midnight film screening. Adrian smiled. That sounds like college. That sounds like poor domestic planning. She gets that from me. She gets charm from you. Poor domestic planning is entirely her own achievement. Adrian laughed. It was easy. That was what people misunderstood about them. They were easy together because nothing was being asked anymore. Is she coming home for spring break? He asked. She says yes. Which means she'll arrive with 2 bags of laundry, and the emotional intensity of someone who has discovered group projects are a human rights issue. She'll want money. She'll want groceries and then money. I'll handle groceries. You always say that like you won't also give her money. I'm weak. You are. They stood there for a moment, watching the room, two people who had once made a daughter by accident, and then spent 2 decades trying not to make that anyone's wound. Adrian looked at the ballroom. You built this beautifully. Don't sound surprised. I'm not. I remember when you planned that fundraiser at 22 with no budget and a venue that smelled like damp carpet. It was not damp carpet. It was definitely damp carpet. It was character. It was mildew. Margot laughed, and for a second, she forgot to keep the sound small. Across the room, the doors opened. Margot felt it before she looked. Not danger. Not exactly. Recognition. Sloane Whitaker stepped in from the rain like she had been expected by the weather. She wore black tonight, but not a simple black. A sleek velvet suit with nothing obvious underneath except a narrow line of pale skin at the throat, her blonde hair tucked behind one ear, lips dark enough to look intentional and careless at the same time. She handed her coat to the attendant without taking her eyes off the room. Then off Margot. Then off Adrian. Margot thought. There it is. Sloane smiled. It was beautiful. It was also not friendly. Adrian followed Margot's gaze and saw her. Is that Sloane Whitaker? He asked. Yes. Should I be afraid? No. Sloane started toward them. Margot kept her expression level. Adrian, annoyingly observant after all these years, murmured, Should you? Margot gave him a look. Go donate something. I did donate something. Donate again. He smiled and took a step back just as Sloane arrived. Margot, Sloane said. Not hello. Not good evening. Just her name like she had been holding it in her mouth since the car. Sloane. Sloane looked at Adrian. The pause lasted 1 beat too long to be accidental, and 1 beat too short to be rude. Adrian Cross, Margot said, because she was not going to be pulled into whatever game Sloane's eyes had started playing. Sloane Whitaker. Of course, Adrian said, extending a hand. Good to meet you. Sloane took it. Her smile was polished, now society ready. Anyone watching from 10 feet away would see a charming introduction. Margot, unfortunately, was standing close enough to see the possessive spark beneath it. Adrian, Sloane said. I've heard your name. Adrian's expression stayed pleasant. I hope not in connection with anything criminal. Not recently. He laughed. Margot did not. Sloane's gaze flicked toward her, satisfied. There was no reason for Sloane to be jealous of Adrian. None. He was not a rival. He was not an unfinished chapter. He was the father of Margot's daughter, and a man with whom Margot had built a functional peace years ago. Sloane knew that. Which made it worse. Sloane did not get jealous because she felt threatened by romantic possibility. She got jealous because some childish, glittering, inconvenient part of her did not like evidence that anyone had ever had access to Margot before her. Even access that had ended before Sloane had finished college. How do you two know each other? Sloane asked. Margot looked at her. Sloane's face was innocent. Entirely too innocent. Adrian answered before Margot had to. We share a daughter. Sloane's eyes sharpened. It was quick. Almost invisible. But Margot saw it. The tiny recalibration. The reminder that Adrian had not merely dated Margot. He had history that could not be erased by charm, wealth, or a better dress. Our daughter is in college now, Margot added, because she refused to let Sloane fill silence with imagination. Adrian came tonight for the foundation. Of course, Sloane said. How grown up. Adrian looked amused. We try. We do more than try, Margot said. He inclined his head. Fair. Sloane's fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. Margot should not have enjoyed that. She did not enjoy it exactly. But there was something hot about Sloane's jealousy when it was not cruel. Something alive. Something that made the air thinner. It was not healthy enough to build a life on, and Margot knew that perfectly well, but it made her skin wake up in the present tense. Sloane leaned slightly toward Margot. Can I borrow you for a second? She asked. Margot lifted one eyebrow. I'm running an event. I can see that. Then you understand the answer. No, Sloane said softly. I understand that you want the answer to be no. Adrian cleared his throat. hiding a smile. Margot looked at him. Don't, she warned. I said nothing. You thought loudly. I have to make a call anyway. Adrian gave Sloane a polite nod, then turned back to Margot. Tell her to text me if she needs anything before midterms. I will. And Margot? Yes. He glanced at the room. It really is beautiful. This time, she let herself accept it. Thank you. Adrian walked away. Sloane watched him go. Then she stepped into the space he had left. Not close enough to be improper. Close enough to make Margot aware of the exact distance between them. So, Sloane said, Adrian. Margot took a sip of champagne. You sound like you just discovered ancient ruins. In a way. He is not ruins. No. He looks very well preserved. Margot almost smiled despite herself. Don't start. I'm being generous. You're being territorial. Sloane's gaze returned to her face. The playfulness did not disappear, but something more honest moved under it. Yes. There was the problem with Sloane. She could be impossible, and then she could be honest so quickly Margot lost the neat shape of her frustration. You have no reason to be, Margot said. I know. Do you? Yes. Then, Sloane looked at Margot's mouth. Not long. Long enough. I don't like picturing anyone having a version of you I don't get. Margot's breath paused. A waiter passed behind them with a tray of champagne, and the room went on being elegant around them, entirely indifferent to the fact that Sloane Whitaker had just reached across years and found one of Margot's softer places without permission. Margot kept her voice even. That's not how time works. I know that too. Very intellectual evening for you. Sloane smiled. Don't be mean. It makes me want you. Sloane. What? I'm at a charity event. I'm already behaving against my nature. Margot looked away because the smile was coming whether she allowed it or not. That was another problem. Sloane amused her. Not in the easy way Adrian did. With old familiarity and harmless timing. Sloane amused her like trouble leaning in the doorway, well-dressed and waiting to see if Margot had learned her lesson. She had not. Not entirely. Nora is looking panicked, Margot said. Nora always looks panicked near you. You have that effect on employees. I have standards. You have a worshipful little army. They are paid. Not enough, I'm sure. Margot handed her champagne to a passing waiter. Enjoy the gala. Sloane's fingers brushed the inside of Margot's wrist before she could step away. A brief touch. Low. Hidden. Familiar. Margot stopped. Sloane leaned in just enough for her voice to land close to Margot's ear. Enjoy pretending you aren't watching me. Margot did not turn her head. But her skin answered. That was the irritating thing. Her skin had no dignity where Sloane was concerned. Sloane let go and drifted toward the bar, leaving Margot to stand there for 1 second too long with the ghost of fingers at her wrist and a professional emergency waiting 20 feet away. The next 40 minutes moved quickly. The first toast happened. The main donor was introduced. A minor seating issue was solved before it became visible. 2 board members who hated each other were separated by a charming retired judge with a passion for bird photography. The wine service stayed on time. The string trio shifted into something softer. Margot worked. Working steadied her. It always had. She did not feel empty inside her work. That was not her problem. She loved what she did. Loved the tension of it, the precision, the invisible architecture of a successful evening. She had not stumbled through life waiting for someone to rescue her from loneliness. She had raised a daughter, built a company, chosen clients carefully enough that her name now opened doors she used to enter through catering corridors. She had a good life. A full one. What she did not have was someone to come home to who felt like a decision, not an interruption. And lately, that absence had started making itself known in small ways. An extra coffee cup in a cafe window. A couple arguing softly over paint colors and somehow making it look intimate. Her daughter texting less because college was doing what it was supposed to do, pulling her forward. Margot was proud of that. She had wanted her daughter to have her own life. She just had not expected the silence afterward to sound quite so specific. Ms. Hale. Margot turned. The woman was tall, with dark auburn hair cut just past her collarbone and a winter white dress that looked simple only until one noticed how perfectly it fit. She held no champagne, no phone, no social armor. Just herself. She looked like someone who knew exactly what suited her and had stopped asking permission years ago. Yes, Margot said. The woman smiled. Not wide. Not practiced. Celeste Rowan. I think I'm supposed to thank you for making the Heritage House look like itself, only better. Margot paused. That was not the usual compliment. Most people praised flowers, lighting, food, the obvious things. You know the building? Margot asked. A little. I consulted on one of the side rooms 3 years ago. Not this ballroom, unfortunately. No one asked me before they committed crimes against the east ceiling. Margot looked toward the ceiling, then back at her. The east ceiling has been bothering me all night. Celeste's eyes lit with quiet satisfaction. Good. I was worried I was alone. You're not. That's comforting. It shouldn't be. It means we're both trapped with it. Celeste laughed softly. The sound did not try to draw anyone closer. It did anyway. Margot glanced at the program in her hand. Restoration. Architecture. Mostly historic restoration now. Small studio. Selective projects. Occasional arguments with people who think replacing original woodwork with something cleaner is a vision. Sounds like noble suffering. Expensive suffering, ideally. Margot smiled. There was something unusually pleasant about the way Celeste spoke. Dry but not sarcastic. Confident, but not performing for approval. She did not seem impressed by the room in the way most guests were, nor bored by it in the way some wealthier guests pretended to be. She was simply present. Looking, noticing, enjoying what deserved to be enjoyed and judging what deserved judgment. That, Margot could respect. Are you here with the Preservation Council? Margot asked. As a guest. A few of my clients are involved, and someone thought I should step away from floor plans long enough to wear real shoes. Margot glanced down. The shoes were very real. Black, elegant, with a heel low enough to suggest a woman who liked beauty but intended to survive the evening. A practical choice, Margot said. I've reached the age where I refuse to limp for someone else's idea of glamour. Margot looked at her again. 46 or 47, perhaps. Not trying to look younger. Not asking the room to validate her. There was a satisfaction in that. A magnetism that had not